we got on today to have this Ukraine conversation, and I definitely want to have it. I know, recently I put out those 3 videos. One was calling that tank a Russian tank, and then the other was me correcting that to some degree.
Right.
And what happened with that, just because I know I wasn't really communicating that to you, what happened with that was me putting that out there. And because it was an international story, I decided to go ahead and put it on Gab into some of the international groups. And that's where, so before this started becoming a thing on Facebook and everybody yelling Ukraine, Ukraine, it was a day before that where Gab was kind of saying Gab France and Gab Canada and Gab, and another group was, I think, Australia, were just blasting me like this Ukrainian tank. It's just, and I just, like always, got into the conversation with them and was kind of open to hearing what they had to say. And they had given me the information saying that it was the Z's on the vehicles, and that's what denotes a Russian truck or a Russian vehicle from a Ukrainian vehicle, because they have a lot of the same equipment. And then, of course, true to my nature, that sent me down a whole nother rabbit hole where now I'm saying to myself, all right, so if the Z is, and I did a whole video on this, so I don't want to cover it all again, but there's just a lot of reasons why the Z made no sense to me. There were different versions of it. Some had triangles, some had squares, some were done red. And I'm like, it's got to be saying more than just, But anyway, you can check out the other video for that. It was just released a day or so ago. But, after going down that rabbit hole, and then I came out with the propaganda video, and then and now me and you had the conversation, and it really led me to doing some more thinking about my position on Ukraine. And that's where, we had that conversation. And for those that don't know what I mean by we had a separate conversation offline about this that made us want to get on here and talk about it live and see if anybody else wants to engage in that conversation as well. So, Jack, let's start, because I think we both watched one of the things we watched was the same lecture, right?
Right. And that was the professor out of a university in Illinois, and that was done in 2014. And
Right.
really, he touched on some of the points that I had mentioned last night, and they were kind of counter to what you were thinking. And so with that challenge, like you said, you went out and started digging in. And interestingly enough, you watched the same lecture that I did.
Right.
And then that kind of turned a corner for you. So, tell me, George, what was it that turned that corner? Where were you and where are you at?
Yeah. So my initial take on the whole Russia thing, and really it's not new. This is the take that I had forever. Going back to 2014 with respect to their stance on Ukraine, was I understood where they were coming from, kind of thing, you know as far as not wanting NATO to be in Ukraine, because it's kind of a Monroe Doctrine thing, from a West perspective. But at the same time, I was convinced that he wants to take over Ukraine and go back to the old Soviet Union.
Hey,
I mean that.
let me stop you just for a second, just in case some folks see this in the future. Monroe Doctrine. That's kind of what the Cuban Missile Crisis was all about. Anything that occurs in the Western Hemisphere, we jump into. And so having Ukraine as part of NATO, then they are considered part of the Western Hemisphere. And as a result of that, if there's any attack, we are then obligated, due to the Monroe Doctrine, to come to their defense. Right?
Correct. Yeah. So think Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So Cuban Missile Crisis would be the inverse of how Putin is seeing this whole thing go down. So to him, NATO is Khrushchev showing up on Cuba's border, and now bordering the United States, and creating drama, right? And that's essentially how it's going. So in the end, I understand that premise. I guess the big difference after, and just for the research sake of it, like, because I just did this piece on propaganda and I wanted to kind of cover that. And just from that perspective of propaganda, I, I guess the way that I approached this was to go in because I already had that notion that, like, all right, Putin just wants to go back to the old Soviet Union and he wants to, he wants to go ahead and take over Ukraine. He took Crimea last time, so I was 100% sure that that's what he wanted to do. But in essence, now I'm sitting here looking at it. I went in and I attacked this from an angle of saying, what if I'm wrong? And this is what I was trying to portray in my last video, where I was saying about propaganda and saying, when you go about something, never use Google, try to use, neutral search engines. And then at the same time, start your search. If you've already got a general opinion, but you're just looking for information, then start your search with what goes against your opinion. And that's what I did here. And then that's how I stumbled across that lecture. And I came across some articles and I was reading some different stuff on the topic. And I got to tell you, as far as the motive, comparing it to what's actually happening now on the ground, I'm not convinced that he wants to take over Ukraine. I'm not convinced that that's his grand scheme. I know that people like Ben Shapiro and others have come out and said that kind of stuff, but that's the full mainstream media narrative. And yeah, some of these people are smarter than I am to some degree. Ben Shapiro is anyway. That guy's like a freaking borderline savant. But in the end, when you look at the situation, Putin hasn't really gone all out. Like he like we had that. What was that fake story that came out with the 13 soldiers telling the ship to I avoided that one, thank God. That one got everybody. That one got, like, even Bongino was apologizing for it, but that one got everybody. But like the 13 soldiers, they were telling the warship to go F off. And then, apparently a fight ensued and all 13 died valiantly when they lost it. And it turns out the real story was there were like 89 people there. And in the end, not only did they not die, but the Russians were feeding them and, providing medical care and things like that. And like, when you hear that kind of stuff, it tells me clearly they're not out here to get the Ukrainian citizens, right? There's just a complicated relationship there, no?
Yeah, it really is. I think that, look, even if his intent is to take the Ukraine, and I'm not saying that it is, I don't think that he wants to cause devastation. I don't think he wants to, let's put it this way, he wants to harm as few people as possible.
Right.
Because whether his intent is to take it or not, he wants a relationship with the Ukraine, but he believes that basis the eastern half of Ukraine, which speaks primarily Russian, there are a lot of pro-Russians there, and he does not want to lose their support. He would want to bring everybody together. And so he's focusing on key infrastructure right now.
Right. And that, another point to make there is that even if this was a situation of him wanting to take over Ukraine, you could still argue that he'd be doing this. So I get that point too. Like he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to take over rubble, right? But in the end, it's more, to me, the way it was outlined and the argument that made the most sense to me based on what I see going on the ground right now is that Putin's attitude is, and this is where the bad guy, and like, I'm not saying Putin's a good guy, right? I don't want to come off like I'm, like Putin's just misunderstood, he's
Right.
just a misunderstood dictator, like that's not where I'm coming from. But like, just in the sense of political argument, we would never allow what NATO is asking to do right now, ever. Like, to me, I feel like Putin's motives, whether you agree with them or not, are clear. Like I think his motives are well defined. Like it's obvious almost that you can't have, if you're Putin, you can't have NATO right on your doorstep like that. Like, you need Ukraine in there as that buffer between Poland and Ukraine. And that's really where, Like for me, he's clear. What's not clear to me is what what NATO's motive is. Like I'm not seeing what NATO gets out of this, and of course that adds the United States in there. But like, I don't see the benefit, the mass benefit that's worth going through all this grief because Putin is clearly going to do this every time a pro NATO guy comes into power. There, Putin's going to come in and kick him out and kill everybody, in his cabinet and put in somebody he wants. And he did this in 2014, right? He did this, and then years later, they threw the guy out. They all stormed the Capitol, and the guy ended up fleeing to Russia, so that all fell through.
Yeah,
But
and
like,
just
yeah,
for a point of a reference, he did it in it was in the late '90s, and in 2014
right,
is when the tide turned, and they put in a new government that was favoring the West, and so
right,
that
right.
then became a point of contention, obviously.
Right. And I'm saying, even though they got the other leader to flee, like maybe they'll do it again with whoever he puts in now. But like the way I'm seeing it is Putin's attitude is like, look, you know, there's no way this is happening. So if I have to go in and kidnap the guy, kill the guy, do whatever has to happen to whatever leader comes into NATO, for whatever leader comes into Ukraine that wants to become a part of NATO, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to kick some ass and I'm going to take him out. I mean, and he'll do it every 4 or 5 years if need be. Like there's just no scenario here outside of going to full war with Putin that you're gonna get a pro NATO situation in Ukraine or Georgia for that matter, right? Because they want to go to NATO's talking to Georgia too. Like Putin's just
Right.
sitting there like no freaking way. Like on that subject, I agree with him. If I were running Russia and I wasn't a murderous dictator or whatever, I wouldn't allow that either. And that's where the way that like if he wanted to take Ukraine, it would have been a straight out bomb campaign and like it's clear to me anyway. And I, let's see how this plays out, right? So I'm not Nostradamus, but I'm pretty well read on the topic. And in the end, when you look at this, it makes more sense to me to say Putin's just as fine having a free Ukraine. Well, free is subjective. Their government isn't exactly the pretty democracy they get painted to be in our media, but at least free from Russia, right? So in the end, like I don't think he has a problem with Ukraine continuing to exist the way it does. Like I mean, do you think he has an issue with that?
No. In fact, in 2014, he was leading the charge on trying to rally the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the European Union.
Oh, looks like I lost Jack for a second, and now I have a second Jack here. Outstanding. I got to figure out which one's really you. Let's take that one away.
And you got me.
I got you. All
Okay.
right. The other
Yes.
you, we put the other you in the dungeon.
In the basement with Biden.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, so in 2014, he was in favor of an independent and economically sound Ukraine and wanted to help support and fund this independent Ukraine, and was unable to get the support from the European Union and the rest of the players involved. Instead, they wanted it to become part of the West. So he was striving for neutrality and
Right.
independence, but that's not in the game plan. I don't know the motivation of NATO in the West and why they have to try and westernize the Ukraine, whatever that's about. But what I find a little frightening right now is he has an alliance with Iran and he has an alliance with China,
Yeah, the
and
China one is the one. Like Iran to me, like whatever. It's not that Iran is not a threat. I don't want to underplay Iran, but at the same time, they don't scare me
no,
the
no,
way.
I know that he is building up troops in Syria, and that's been a concern, and that's been over the last month. He's um, built up quite a force there,
Right.
and he does have connections to Iran. But so let's jump into theorizing just for a moment, right? So let's take a look at the fact that he has this alliance with China, and he has this alliance with Iran and Syria, right? And
Right.
so China, obviously, uh, they have a lot against the West. They sell us a lot of goods, but they want to be the dominant world power. Russia would like its place on the world stage as well, and of course, the Iranians, they want their place in the Middle East, if not more. But so right now there's a tremendous vulnerability with Biden being in office because of the lack of backlash. So if I'm looking at this triangle of Russia, China, Iran, and thinking, okay, what if they have this discussion? All right, you go into the Ukraine, just throw it right in the face of the United States and NATO. Then we're going to go into Taiwan.
Yeah, and I've been saying that if you've seen the other videos that I put up, like this whole thing, depending on how the reaction to this goes, Xi Jinping is absolutely watching. Like I can't even focus on Ukraine because I'm just looking for Taiwan news every day.
Yeah,
Like it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Like
it might be part of the plan.
well, and that's where it gets, that's where it starts going down the rabbit hole, right? So,
Right.
like, what's a plan, what's not. But that's what I'm saying about like I don't understand NATO's motive here. Like to me, this whole thing goes away if NATO just says, like, whatever, you're not getting in. You know, it's too complicated. It's going to cause too much grief in the region. It's going to be a hot mess. We're going to be dealing with this every 4 or 5 years. It's not worth it. We're not going in.
But
And
it
if they
may,
don't go in and Putin doesn't take over Ukraine, that's a win for everybody. But
yeah, but
instead, they're insisting on having these talks and continuing to have like like Ukraine is in Europe, but it's not in Europe. You know what I'm saying? Like
right,
there's Europe and then there's Europe, right? Like there's Eastern Europe is Europe, but it's not, it's not the France Italy bunch, right? Like it's a different
right.
animal. Like Ukraine is far more Russian than anything else. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say the eastern side is far more Russian. The western side has they have a lot of influence, especially in their government. And one of the things he came out with a statement, and obviously I don't have it memorized, um, but he came out with a statement, and one of the things that he was talking about is that the people of eastern Ukraine don't even really recognize that there's a puppet government. This is his feelings, his thought. This is not my statement. They don't recognize that there's a puppet government installed to do the bidding of the West. And in the long run, it's not going to be in the best interest of the Ukraine. And one of the examples that he has cited in the past, perhaps not in his recent statement, but in 2014, when the new regime was put in place, within that first year, there was something to do with their education system where they were looking to pull back, the ability to learn or speak Russian. I don't recall because it was
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
some
They
time
they were
ago, but
trying to make Ukrainian the like national language, and it caused
right,
all kinds of grief and whatnot.
it
And
did. Yeah,
that's
and
what
so
started the whole.
yeah, so
Yeah.
he looks at that. But George, one of the other things is too. So I, with the NATO, I don't think it has to be one thing. I think it could be a combination of things. And right now, the timing is right, and he is supplying the bulk of the natural energy to Europe. he could literally squeeze Europe, drive the prices through the roof, and cause a tremendous amount of economic chaos. At the
He
same,
could because we have weak leadership. So
yes,
he can do that because we have weak leadership, and that's the and that's what I mean. Where I don't understand, like nothing about NATO's reaction to this entire thing makes sense to me. Because it just to me the whole thing's avoidable by just saying, "Look, Ukraine, we can't do this." Now, if Putin goes in anyway, like, but I guarantee you that if they did that, if they walked away and were like, "Look, we're not completely turning our backs on you, but we can't let you in NATO. It's going to cause ridiculous world instability. We're not bringing about World War III just so you guys can be in freaking NATO." Like Ukraine, look, if Russia's not coming after Ukraine, all right, nobody is. Right? Like if Russia's not coming after him, no one is. So at that point,
right,
who cares? Right? Who cares? Like let you know. If put, I guarantee you, if NATO says, "Look, if we kill all this deal about NATO, will you pull out?" I guarantee you, he will. And of course, before people start yelling propaganda, I don't literally guarantee that he will, but like if he doesn't at that point, well, then at least you know what you're dealing with. Because right now, it looks like that's the case. Like right now,
right,
despite all the blabber in the media about, oh, he just wants to bring back the old. Yeah, he does admire. He does look at the old Soviet Union affectionately. He does admire Lenin and whatnot. But like that's different than saying he wants to conquer a country. He could have done this in 2014 if he wanted to. I mean, in the end, it's not a matter of if he just goes in and tries to conquer Ukraine, NATO's not doing anything. What are they going to do?
right,
They don't have any justification to go in and stop him because they're not in NATO.
right,
So then, what would be the premise? What would be the justification for NATO getting involved? And on top of that, if that is the case, if NATO did get involved, what I'd be looking at Taiwan because if NATO gets involved in this all in and starts like really warring it out and trying to protect Ukraine, China makes a move on Taiwan, and now the U.S. is obligated to Taiwan. So now the Europeans, this is where it gets funky because the Europeans then would have to actually run NATO. Like we would have some support there, but we would be playing the role of the France and the Germany. We're like, here's 2 planes, here's a soldier, Oh yeah, you guys bring in the 15,000 troops, and like that. It's going to be the other way around now, and the fact of the matter is their armies are so inept that even all combined, they can't take on Russia. They just can't.
yeah,
I mean, maybe all of them combined might be able to put up a fight, but they've been unlike the United States, which has a huge military budget. These countries have been dumping crap on welfare, these welfare states that they've created forever, and all of them have just been living life under the premise that if anything really hits the fan, the U.S. will just help. Right? But
right,
if Taiwan becomes a thing, they're not obligated to help us in Taiwan the same way that we're obligated to help because right. So, well, I mean, they would technically as a sense of it's a NATO member that would be in conflict or whatever, but like they're going to have their hands full. So and China is not someone that you send a couple planes to, and and send one Navy vessel and a few jets and think that it's going to be okay. Like we're going to have to send serious resources to Taiwan if that goes down.
quite frankly, I don't know that we would.
Yeah, well, there's that angle too, right? Like I thought that through too. Like, would Biden just ignore them altogether? Like, would Biden
Yeah,
just be like, you know what? Sorry, Taiwan. We know we're obligated, but got the whole great reset going on in a few months, and I got I'm just so busy,
yeah,
like, and that's not something to be totally blown off either. It would be the first time that we've completely blown off an obligation, which would destabilize the world because now everyone. Right now, South Korea is going to be like, well, wait a minute, because Kim Jong Un, if he sees that, is going to be like, oh yeah, Oh, you're not protecting these people anymore? Well, then, well, why don't I just go right into South Korea? And the list is going to go on. The list is going to go on. Iran will start rattling this. I mean, everything just falls apart at that point if we don't. But again, the question is, what's the grand motive? And it doesn't, because the media narrative just doesn't make any sense. It does if you're that person, you're getting older, you watch Fox News all the time, you're really into it, the whole get the commie thing, right? Get the commies, like the commies are bad. And you know what Russia is? I'm not saying Russia's a good player. So again, I want to clarify that. But at the same time, if you're that person watching watching that media and consuming that, and you're bought in, as I was honestly not long ago, right? This was just a few days ago where I was fairly convinced that Russia wanted to just take over Ukraine, because I had never really stopped and looked at it. It wasn't an issue that was really on the top of my, interest until now. Now it is. So I went in and started researching it that way. But before that, I didn't really. I could care less about the 2014, Ukraine conflict. It wasn't like, for me, it was more, the research was more based on Marxism and, the history of this whole subversion thing and, all that kind of stuff. So, and now it's the Great Reset. I just bought the Great Reset by Glenn Beck, which I'm about 50 pages into. I just bought it an hour or two ago before we got on. And I'm already enamored and very entertained by it. So, I've always known that it was a thing, but I've never had someone break it down the way Glenn Beck does with a million. Like, I don't know why anybody buys hard copies anymore. I was telling you, it's got a million sources in this book that you're just linking to, clicking to. I'm like, it's taking me forever to read it because I'm going to the sources. I'm starting to read them, and I'm like it took me like 30 minutes to get through a page when I first opened it, because there were like 6 sources on there, and I opened like 4 of them. So but that's a fun book too. I would recommend Great Reset by Glenn Beck to anybody who catches this video. It is definitely, so far, I'm 50 pages in. If it totally goes to crap after this, I'll say that in another video. But so far, it's pretty entertaining. But yeah, as far as Ukraine, man, I just can't friggin'. I don't think anything in the narrative makes sense. That's my stance on it. And I realize that that's going against a lot of conservative thought, and that I'll probably get a lot of grief over it across the network platforms and whatnot. But whatever, that's where I'm at right now. Like based on what I mean, look, if Putin does something different, if he goes in full out invasion, tomorrow, I know he's got a bunch of trucks headed down there now, a bunch of tanks. If they go in and do seize the whole country, then I stand corrected. But again, knowing that they're trying to limit civilian casualties, they're trying to play this thing out, kind of the way the U.S. would, but on their own side, because these are kind of Russians, right? Like, to them, it is kind of like a Russian territory. So they're not trying to go in there and massacre people. So if they're not going in with that intention, I find it, and knowing that they're not going to just hand it over, right? So if they wanted to take Western Ukraine, because Eastern Ukraine would just sign up, so they just need to take Western Ukraine, and I feel like it would be a lot bloodier than it is.
Right. Well, the other part that I think we should talk about is, a little bit more about, the why now. So and we take a look at what's going on with Western culture right now, right? We have this tremendous demoralization that's taking place across the Western hemisphere, whether it's Canada, whether you're talking Australia, things that are occurring in the United States. What do I mean, demoralization? I'm talking about things like, the
Yuri
pandemic.
Bezmenov stuff.
Yuri Bezmenov stuff. Yeah, from the 80s. For those of you that don't know, Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB agent that defected. And in the 80s, he talked a lot about this. And if you go
He was
back,
actually a media expert, I think. He was when he
media
came
expert.
here. Yeah, when he came here, he was considered one of the leading experts on KGB propaganda. That's why he was teaching those courses and all that stuff.
Got it. Okay.
He broke it down well.
Yeah, he broke it down very well. And so if you look at something like that and you take that into consideration, right? So now you have Putin, you have China. They're looking at the weakness that is inherent in those type of systems, let's say, this socialist type system. And they're looking at that and they're seeking to take advantage of that weakness and turn the tide and become the dominant players, ousting the current dominant players, which are the United States and to a lesser extent, Britain, followed by the rest of the European Union. And so I'm certainly not taking the side of, China nor the side of Russia. But I do believe that the weaknesses that we're currently showing and the socialist movement that's going on in the United States, which I personally abhor and want no part of and will
Right.
resist until I'm dead, I understand why he would abhor it as well. That I might share with him, Yeah,
Right.
I don't like to see what's going on. But he sees that as a weakness and he's striking during the course of that weakness because he does not want that type of mentality to start penetrating into the Ukraine and other areas. Just a,
Yeah.
a thought. Look, at the end of the day, I try and take everything I can into consideration. And as I learn more, my opinions change and mold and shape, right?
Right.
It's based on the availability of information and trying to look at the history and then trying to rationalize it. At the end of the day, I'm not pro Russia, but I'm certainly not pro New World Order either.
Right. And that's why, I mean, honestly, the whole thing aside, after I'm done being creeped out by this whole scenario and trying to figure out exactly what is going on and whatnot, I am fascinated by it as well. Like there's such a it's almost like a soap opera. Like you've got all these players. Like I know Putin is not a part of some great reset. Like like he just ain't. And even what's funny is when I'm reading Beck's book, The Great Reset, and even in the first 50 pages, he doesn't make the case that Putin, like the way he paints the picture is that like this is just a Western thing, and that China and India and Russia refuse to get involved. Like he gives you this whole dystopian view of what society would be like, and then at the end of it, he's like, China, India, and Russia refuse to buy in, so they're not dealing with any of the stuff. So it's not even like a new world order per se, in accordance with at least with what Glenn Beck has researched. In accordance with the Great Reset. Like to him, it's more of a Western thing where, it almost sounded to me, and again, I'm only 50 pages in, but it almost sounded to me like he's suggesting the Great Reset is something you can't opt out of. And look, this is why we're Article 5, right? This is why we're so crazy Article 5. Right. I mean, every single story we've talked about for the last almost year now, right? March, I think it was the end of March, beginning of April when we first started, right? Doing shows like this, which we haven't done
Right.
in 8 months or so. But like, when we first started, that was as soon as we got into Article 5 and we researched it and got through the whole runaway convention stuff, and we're able to cut through that and get to the realities and get to how it works. It became very clear that that's the only way to stop all this, right? Because in
Right.
the end, what are they doing, right? They're printing money. Well, implementing fiscal restraints would stop that, right? It would put serious restraints on the way, right? And so like these different pieces, the government overreach, just taking power from the federal government, just that act alone, forget the term limits for a second. Just the act of the federal overreach and stopping these regulatory agencies and stopping that alone, like Marxism can't thrive in that environment.
No, it can't. I mean, look, any type of centralized power is not good for the common man, the everyday person, right? It's just
Right.
it's never been. The whole premise of, hey, rally around my flag and I'll take care of you has never worked. And it was never
Ever.
designed that work that way in the United States. It wasn't about rallying around a flag per se,
Right.
because every state had its flag. It was about building independent communities that collaborate and work together. And so, which is interesting because, the big thing on the far left right now is, oh, diversity, diversity, diversity. But
No
they're
unity
making
though.
everybody say the same damn thing, right?
Yeah.
All you have to do is go to college and you come out parroting everything, right? And so the real diversity is, putting things back into the hands of decentralized communities. And that's where we will live our best lives, because we have far more control over those lives. But anytime you move to a centralized form of government, then it's all about power, and it's about those people that are at the epicenter of that large regime, for lack of a better word.
I mean, look, they've been at this now since the late 50s, right? And they've been slowly. I mean, the hippies were the first generation that they celebrated as a win, right? They were the first
You're
demoralized
going to go back
generation,
to that again.
right? They were though, right? Yeah, that's right. You, buddy, your generation, you're the first freaking indoctrinated group, okay? And and frankly, my generation in the 80s were kind of taking it back a little bit in the Reagan era. But then, and that whole Reagan era was really pushback against that, right? Against that whole hippie movement and the demoralization and anti-America. America's always the problem. Like the 80s was a pushback against that. But in the end, even while that pushback was happening, right, there were still in the schools, in the political seats, in Hollywood, everywhere you looked, it was still infiltrating everywhere,
Yeah.
despite the fact that there was, that the other generations had stepped up. It didn't matter. They had already gotten their tentacles into everything. And even with the fall of the Soviet Union, it wasn't enough to, like, the ball was rolling at that point, and now, this is that mass formation psychosis that, like, what was his name? Desmond,
I
Mateus
know who.
Desmond,
Yeah.
Dr. Mateus Desmond, right? And then Dr. Robert Malone brought it up on that Rogan show, and it went crazy. But we did a piece on that too. But that's true, like that, and it's not. He didn't invent that. That's something that's been going on forever. Mass formation psychosis, and it can affect anybody, right? Like I was joking. I think I joked in one of my videos where I was like, there are some Trump supporters who are in a mass formation. like some of them are. Like when Trump was making comments, like, yeah, he said it himself because he knows it. He's like, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they still wouldn't lose any. He's like, and it was funny at the time, but like there was truth to it, right? There was
Right.
truth to it. So, like, I mean, most of his supporters are not, but there's that fringe, right? But when it comes to Marxism, no, there's a good, it's that Solomon Asch theory, right? The Solomon Asch experiment with conformity, right? That's been duplicated dozens of times, over the years since the 70s, where he put the three lines there and one of them was clearly different, right? And then he asked people to match them up, and 8 people were there. 7 of them were in on the experiment and were going to answer the wrong answer. And then the one guy was the subject. And what was unique about it is the percentages, because they fall right in line with the mass formation. Like it's 30% would have argued that line was the correct answer no matter what. Like they were getting into it, demanding that they were right. Then you had 40% who knew that the line was not the right answer, but admitted that they answered it anyway because they didn't want to rock the boat. And then you've got the other third, the last 30%, and that's us, right? That last 30% are the people, and most of our subscribers for that matter, that are just like questioning everything, that are sitting there saying, this doesn't make any freaking sense. Why am I walking into a restaurant? I got to take a mask off when I sit down, put it on when I stand up. That doesn't make any sense. Like, whereas that 40%, they just do it.
Yeah, they're going to go with the flow.
I just want to
Look,
eat my meal, right? And that's the group we got to reach. It's that 40%. The other 30% are lost. They're lost. You're not turning them around.
yeah. Sorry about that. That was my phone.
All right.
I,
Yeah,
I
you're
just
not
had that.
turning that other 30% around. The only ones that are up for negotiation is that 40% in the middle.
Right.
If you can finally piss them off enough where they start standing up and start joining the good 30% that are like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, now you've got 70%. Now, no matter what the media does, no matter what Hollywood does, right? No matter what goes on there, it's 70-30. Now the
Yeah.
small group is ostracized. Now maybe you can penetrate a few of them.
Yeah.
But
Well,
like,
at the end of the day, it, this, not to make it overly simplistic, but really people just need to question everything. If they do, and they do their own homework, and I have a feeling that most people are going to be too lazy,
but I think
and
people are
and
getting better at that now. Like even this
there
Ukrainian
are a lot of
exercise
people.
that just went on, I think people are starting to catch on to this stuff. Like it's not, and I know this latest barrage. I mean, this really was a barrage of propaganda coming out of Ukraine. I don't know any, like even reporters who I know, from years of watching, like even they got caught up, a little bit because it just seemed like it was coming off the ground. It was hot, and and that's the thing when it's stuff that's coming out of a war and it's hot and it's video and like you're not thinking, you're thinking that there's an effort for propaganda, but you're not thinking it's that granular. Like there's an element of thought that like with all these cameras and all these phones and all this stuff out there, that this wealth of information is going to come out. And a lot of it was true. Like a lot of the stuff that came out was true, but mixed in with it were all of these wacky stories. And then you get these freaking agencies like that
Yeah.
Italian news agency with the video game. Like seriously, a video game? Like that's not, you know, like there'd be one or two organizations that show you a photo, that they may have thought was legit, but it turns out, it's an old photo. Like one with their president, their former president geared up and all that. It was like a 2015 photo, but like people thought he was gearing up right now. Like stuff like that, I could see how someone slips and falls into, because it's more minor stuff. But stuff like putting a video game on your green screen is crazy. Like that's direct, you know. And it's not only that, but a video game with images of missiles shooting into the freaking air. Like, if you're in Ukraine and you're watching that video, and it's very well possible that they have access to Italian news. Like if you're in Ukraine, and not only that, but what happens, right? Other news stations see that, and now they go and rip that video footage from them and start using it on their own because nobody goes and does real journalism anymore. And
Right.
it's to the point now where you don't even want to opine on stuff because you're like, I mean, every freaking left, right, upside down, whatever, independent, everybody was saying that was a Russian tank on that ran over that car. And it's like, unless you're a military expert, even if you are a military expert, they use a lot of the same vehicles, so you still might not know. Yeah, you still might believe that, right? If it was coming out, and
Right.
like, and then and I still don't know that it was a Ukrainian vehicle. Like the stuff I put this in the video. Like I said, hey, everyone's going with Ukrainian. I'm gonna go with Ukrainian, but I got to tell you, the information they gave me to say that it was Ukrainian, that doesn't hold up. You can't put water in that glass. Like that glass got holes in it. That Z, they have Z's on them. Like every group had a different type of Z, and I'm like, there's no way a freaking first world army is telling the difference between their vehicles and enemy vehicles with chalk and freaking spray paint. Like it's just ridiculous. It's like just the face of it is so dumb that I'm just like the one theory, and I put that in the video that I had that made sense to me because I was asking those questions immediately, and I'm like, none of the explanations for the Z's were answering those questions except this one guy. He was a director of some think tank, and he had said that that his experts believe that they were signifying where each battalion was, like the destination, something related to the destination, and that's why they were different on every one, because he made the same point I did. If they're just to tell the difference, just put one symbol. Why do you need, And then it's like, if you're the Ukrainians, why not just start painting Z's on your cars and confuse the
Right.
shit out of everybody? Now
Right.
you just got to cry. Everyone's shooting each other. Like, it's like,
I could tell you're passionate about this because we started our conversation tonight, and you started going down the tank trail,
it
and then
pissed
we
me
got
off.
and then we got into what we set out to discuss, and now we're back into the tanks here at the end.
The tanks are still a part of Ukraine. Okay. We went a
I
little
know they
adrift with
are.
Article 5 and
That
the
tank
mass
story is
formation.
driving you nuts.
It is the tank
It
stories,
is.
because I don't have answers, Jack. I don't have answers. So
I
like, if
know.
people are gonna blow you up and be like, and be, oh, look at this, your wife is on here. She said,
Text her
where
and
you
tell her
at?
that's why I couldn't answer the phone.
She said, where are you at? She's like, it's all black over there.
I'm on the porch.
She doesn't know about the other Jack that I threw in the dungeon.
Yeah. We'll have to go back and rewind.
Yeah. All right,
Love you,
man.
babe. Not
So,
usual,
look,
my wife.
I think the opinion we put out was probably not the most popular, but right now, from what I see out there, I think it's right. I
Yeah,
think
and look, all we're doing is sharing information, and we're questioning things, and that's what we should be doing on everything. Question
yeah, no, I
everything.
agree. I
So
agree, and
it,
that's why
yeah,
the tank thing still sticks under my skin.
yeah. I mean, look, is any of this our final opinion? No, because we really don't know. Some of it is, we're hypothesizing, but the fact of the matter is, you have to question it.
Yep.
So it's people that might be watching this now or in the future. It's really not about whether we're right or wrong. Get the hint. Start questioning things. Start doing your own research. Start looking into things. Don't be looking for somebody to tell you what's going on, because you could read 5 different people and they're going to tell you different variations. So that's what's important, is that you dig down and start looking at what a variety of people say on both sides of the fence. And
Yeah.
and then you start cutting through the mire a little bit more. So really, that's I would say that would probably be a very good takeaway, if anything, from this video. Don't take what we've said as a best and final opinion. We're still molding ours as information comes available. Do the same.
Hey, what does VUN mean?
VUN?
Yeah.
VUN?
Yeah, it says VUN, FYI. Elisa, if you're still, I don't know if you're still here, but I don't know what that means. So I finally figured out how to get the chat to pull up on this software. I'm sitting here. If you see me like looking around back and forth, it's because I got YouTube up on this screen. I got Facebook up on this screen, and I'm trying to like keep track in case there was comments that came through. And I just noticed she commented probably 15 minutes ago, and it says VUN FYI. I don't know what that means. We'll have to hit a dictionary for that.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It's it. Well,
I think I'm gonna put a link to that guy's speech or his presentation, that Chicago or Illinois professor. That it's funny because we both watched them, and what's funnier is some of the people that this one woman, Laura, who's with the survivalist group that I'm in with Facebook. She sent me a message today with that same lecture, and I was like, "That's so funny," because I just got done watching it while I was doing my opposing opinion research, and the dude pretty much sold me on the concept, because everything that guy says in that lecture is right. Everything
yeah.
he says is right. So it's
It's
like,
interesting, yeah. So I think you should put it in the description. Let people be the judge. Let them see it and see what they think. And that formed a basis for our conversation this evening. So really, if you watch it, it is thought provoking, and maybe have other people that watch it and have your own discussions. That's how George and I ended up doing a podcast, is having discussions. We'd both see something, challenge each other, and then one day we decided, let's do a podcast. And so here we are.
and here we are, almost a year later.
Yeah.
All right. Don't, if anyone who's still watching the video at this point, much appreciated. Make sure you're smashing the subscribe button. If you're watching on Facebook, make sure you're clicking that follow. I'm not sure what the difference like and follow is, but follow. We need follow. So we appreciate the likes though, but we definitely want the follow. I think it might be if you like it instantly follows. I don't really know, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of all that. But that being said, thanks for watching. We'll jump on from time to time. I think it was successful in the sense that we didn't have any real major issues with the software, and I finally did find the chat bar. That comment that I was saying, I don't know what it is. I think it's one of those porn things.
Oh,
On YouTube, there are like people, I don't know if it's bots or whatever, but whenever you go live or, if you random post, they'll put these like links in there to these like disgusting sites. But like YouTube's good at scrubbing them. So like I'm looking at it on the software, but I don't think you can see it on YouTube. YouTube gets rid of them pretty quick. So no worries there. We're still child friendly. All right, so we're going to call it a day. I'm ending the stream here, buddy.
all right. See you later, George.
All right.